Throughout all sporting and recreational events, participation is a vital element to the success of a game or an event. The participation rate can be affected by many factors that influence an individual or peer group's involvement in physical activity. While Figueroa's framework provides a particular research model that illustrates the interconnected nature of participation in sport, Figueroa's framework does not account for the degree of differences between influences for groups or individuals. The structural and cultural levels of Figueroa's framework determine participation within many recreational and sporting codes, in particularly Gaelic football. Using relevant primary and secondary evidence to justify my claims, I will evaluate the above two levels of Figueroa's framework, which I believe influence my peer group, and explain the interconnected nature of these levels. Within Figueroa's framework, the first level that I believe would have an influence on my peers' participation within Gaelic football is at the structural level. This level can be seen as the way in which resources, rewards, and statuses are distributed to various sectors, and how the allocation of resources might impact on access and equality of opportunities to participate. According to Australian Gaelic Football Association, Gaelic is a not-for-profit organisation which receives little government funding due to its small member size, which therefore classifies them as a sporting association level 1. Treasurer of the Australasian Gaelic Association, Jane O'Halloran, stated in a personal conversation on August 23, 2012.
Each year we receive what is called an Operational Sustainability Program, or an OSP, funding of $5,000 from the Department of Sport and Recreational Office, or the DSR.
As far as equipment goes, the Australian government do not fund for any sporting equipment. However, there are options which local funding can be granted for Gaelic sporting facilities and grounds which need improving. Therefore, it can be seen, due to the lack of funding, problems such as lack of equipment, high sign-up fees, and possible poor grounds will arise. Access to the sport by my peers would be limited by the high cost to participate, and the lack of resources available to each player and their teams. Another factor from Figueroa's framework from the structural level that would affect my peers' participation within Gaelic football is in the way in which sponsorship affects physical activity. TV depicts the main movements of the sponsorship cycle, and therefore has the greatest influence to affect all three of the components, being sponsorship, sports, development, and spectator view or interests. Currently, mixed Gaelic football in Australia has no television coverage within any major broadcasting stations. Therefore, it is seen to lack in all three areas of the sponsorship cycle. This will in turn affect my peers' participation in Gaelic football, as the interests from spectators would be nil and have no competition to develop their skills. This shows that within the Gaelic football there is a lack of equality to the sport because of the lack of interest and social acceptance. Therefore, it would be unlikely my peers would find Gaelic football appealing, as there is no motivation driven by television and the sponsorship cycle. The third factor from Figueroa's framework at the structural level, which will negatively influence my peers to participate in Gaelic football, is television. This can be seen in Brian Stoddart's 6 Trends. The conservative nature of television and advertising has ensured that the traditional male-dominated sports have been given the most coverage. If Stoddart's trend is accepted, then it will not have a positive influence on my peers to participate in mixed Gaelic football due to it being a mixed-gender sport. Assuming Stoddart's trends to be correct, it will receive next to no broadcasting coverage, therefore would negatively influence my peers due to the lack of equality shown within Gaelic football in the Australian sport culture. Another level of Figueroa's framework which would influence my peers' involvement in Gaelic football can be found on the cultural level. This level is concerned with the shared assumptions, beliefs and values about issues such as body image, the social construction of gender and ethics, and how these issues might affect access and equity to exercise in sport and physical activity. The first factor from the cultural level which will negatively influence my peers in Gaelic football is of gender. Within the results from a survey conducted within Cavendish Road State High School in Brisbane, it was found that for a female to play mixed Gaelic football, 76% of students found them to be a butch. This stereotypical imprint, which was placed on females who play Gaelic football, would negatively appeal to my peers, as my female friends would feel as if they themselves were being categorized as a butch, and my male friends would assume that girls who played Gaelic football are butchers, and therefore assume stereotypically that they are not attractive. If this stereotype and inequality were to continue in the coming years, my peers would be less likely to participate within Gaelic football. One final factor from Figueroa's framework at the cultural level that will have a negative influence on my peers' participation in Gaelic football is nationalism. Nationalism is a sentimental aspiration and consciousness of the value of nation-state. This is evident when sporting events are used to call on people to unify behind a nation's athlete to form an allegiance. As stated within an article written about the Australian passion for sport, sport has developed a nationalism which has unified Australia and has helped bridge the inequalities of race and gender. This shows that nationalism can positively influence one's participation with physical activity. However, within Gaelic football, as it is not an Australian-bred sport, people do not want to back something from another country, resulting in a limited opportunity for nationalism to have a positive influence on my peers. Through an analysis of aspects in Figueroa's framework, it can be clearly seen from the examples provided that my peers are affected in a negative sense in regards to participation in Gaelic football. It is also evident that due to a lack of funding, many problems arise, which majorly impact my peers' participation. Furthermore, without a sense of nationalism involved in Gaelic football, my peers are also negatively affected. In conclusion, it can be stated that Figueroa's framework does not provide a framework to account for participation. However, it has aided my research to understand my peers' participation in Gaelic football. Through this research, it can be found my peers view Gaelic football in Australia negatively. Unless barriers such as a lack of funding, sponsorship, resources and nationalism are addressed, Gaelic football will evidently not grow as a sport within my peers in Australian society.